Alright, this is Chat UTD. I was going to do a video on the ownership. I have done a video on the ownership that was sort of pre-prepared regarding Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments about immigration and whether or not that could be the start of an unravelling and the potential for new owners. What would have to happen? Is there a pathway? What would have to happen? And also looking at the stadium as well. But to be honest, the Sir Jim Ratcliffe stuff's gone stone dead. I don't think anything's going to happen as a result of that. I don't think there is really a pathway to new ownership, certainly not one that's worth exploring at the moment. So maybe I'll shelve that for another day because something more topical has come up, and that is the financial results for the 6 months in the build up to December of 6 months, including, 6 months ending in the December of 2025. So I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to tag the stadium stuff on the end because the stadium stuff still is relevant actually. So the 6 months ending in December of 2025, United posted a profit of £32.6 million. That is in contrast to, at the same time a year earlier, a £3.9 million loss. So there's a difference of something like £28 million there, £28 million more in profit than what we'd had a year ago. First of all, 28 million quid in the grand scheme of things is not a lot of money. And clubs like City, Arsenal, Liverpool, those results would come and go without anyone batting an eyelid. One, because they're not as big a story as United, but secondly, because it's just insignificant. It's not anything anyone needs to think or worry about, because they're clubs that are financially well run, that don't have any issues with finances, and there's no scrutiny on it, and nor should there be at a club like that. It's not even a footnote on a news article. It's just not important. The only reason it's important to us is because of how badly the club's been run over a 20-year period. And the other thing to consider here is that profit will have been largely made, or has come to fruition, if you like. Things have come to fruition through the decisions that have been made since Ineos came to the club, like the cost cutting and asset stripping. And basically that is human cost for the negligence and the incompetence of 20 years of the ownership of the Glazers. It's things like also putting season ticket prices up, putting ticket prices up in general. There's going to be more profit when you cut costs and you put prices up, but that is all at the cost of the fans and people who are in your normal jobs at the club, who've paid the human sacrifice through doing nothing wrong. And they've paid human sacrifice for the decisions of the Glazers. It's hurt people who are innocent, really. And the Glazers, all the while people are losing their jobs and the fans are paying more money for tickets, the Glazers have taken £1.2 billion off Jim Ratcliffe for a stake in Man United, for supposed strategic investment in Man United, and also are apparently looking to buy a Indian cricket club for £1.8 billion. So it's just all in such poor taste. It's the reason for the cost cutting, which has led to a slight improvement in profit margin, is just disgusting. And it's also important to look at the wider scope of this. The results showed that we owe £500 million in transfer fees. We're £1.3 billion in debt. This is a club that want the new stadium that could cost up to £3 billion. It's just it's absolutely absurd. £1.3 billion worth of debt. And Omar Barada has got the cheek, let me get the quote up, to say, "We are now seeing the positive financial impact of our off-pitch transformation materialise both in our costs and profitability." Well, that kind of covers what I was just talking about then. This made me laugh and rage at the same time. This next bit, we continue to take a football-first approach. It's almost as if the people that run this club are purposely doing and saying things that they know will wind fans up. I'm sure they're not, but it's like they've got behind closed doors and gone, what can we say or do to wind this bunch of idiots up? I think they have utter disdain for Manchester United fans, and they know they can have that and still do whatever they want, and the fans will just lap it up, and the fans will see this as being a positive thing. Football first approach. The Glazers, I'm not even going to say bought United because they didn't. The Glazers found a creative way of owning Manchester United purely to use it as a cash cow and to put their personal debt against a reputable company. Very clever in a way, but that's why they bought Man United, or that's why they own Man United, and that's why they're still here. They have absolutely no interest in Manchester United. They have no care for Manchester United. They have no affection, affiliation, or anything like that towards United, and they own the club. That's a massive problem. You've got owners at City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle. They're trying to find ways of getting money into their clubs. We've got a group of people who are constantly cutting corners to make sure they don't have to put money into the club and to save themselves money to take from the club. Whilst you've got owners like that versus the other types of owners that I just mentioned then, you're never going to achieve that much. You'll have the odd season when you're in the Champions League. I've said that before. You'll have the odd season where you do all right, but sustainably it won't work. Because it just won't. You have a spirit of austerity versus clubs who are desperate to try and find loopholes and creatively get money into themselves, who are already ahead of us anyway. We will never consistently finish in the Champions League positions and or win a Premier League title with this ownership structure. It will not happen. Let's look at the £500 million owed in transfer fees and £1.3 billion worth of debt. So this summer, we're going to be in Europe next season. I don't know if it's going to be in the Conference League, Europa League, or the Champions League, but we will be in Europe next season. There is 8 group games, and I think even if we're in the Champions League, we've got a good chance of being able to qualify for the knockout round. So I think worst case scenario, we'll play 10 games in Europe next season. If we do even a little bit better in the domestic cups, you might play another 5 games in the domestic cups. And I don't think that's crazy optimistic to say that, so that's possible. So there you're looking at 15 games, and we might be more, 15 extra games next season that we're going to have to play on top of what we've played this season. It's nearly half a season's worth of football, 15 extra games. Let's look at the squad. We desperately need 2 fullbacks, 2 midfield players, a left winger and a striker. Bare minimum, that's what we need to be a functional, high-end football team. We need a lot more than that, but that's bare minimum what we need. I'm prepared to forego a striker because maybe you could work around that, but let's say you need at the very, 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 very least 5, okay? We're not getting 5 players this summer. It's a World Cup summer. We can't do more than 1 deal at a time. And we already owe £500 million in transfer fees. So it's quite plausible that in the summer, if we do a bit of business, by the end of the summer, we could owe £600 or £700 million in transfer fees. I don't know if that's on top of the £1.3 billion of debt, because if it is, that's £2 billion of debt essentially, or whether that's all thrown in. But whichever way you look at it, £1.3 billion of debt, £500 million owed in transfer fees, which will rise probably to 600 or 700 this summer. Obscene. I don't know what other clubs have in terms of what they owe, but it won't be that much. It's absolutely ridiculous. And we've got a stadium apparently that we're building that's going to cost, as I've said before, £2.5, £3 billion. You do the maths, doesn't add up. The other thing to think about this in a football sense, because I'm a football fan, I'm concerned about what goes on the pitch, is let's say best case scenario, we get 5 players, which I don't think we will. But if we get 5 players, you've got Casemiro is going, without doubt. Xerxes needs to go, Ugarte needs to go, Mount needs to go. So there's 4 players there that one of them's definitely leaving the club, 3 probably will leave and certainly need to leave. So there's 4 players out, 5 players in. So you have 1 additional player to a squad that's going to be playing 15 more games than what it's played this season. Bear in mind, we make 2 or 3 subs each game because basically we have to crawl over the line with the team that we've got because the rest of the squad isn't good enough. That's playing 1 game a week. And we essentially, if those 4 players go and we get 5 in, as I say, I don't think we are getting 5 in, there's 1 extra player to that. Again, you do the maths. On a football sense, that just doesn't add up. So either two things will happen. One of 2 things will happen. Either you have a tiny squad because you've let go of those 4 players and you bring some players in, but there's as I say, there's not enough in the squad. Or you keep Ugarte, Mount and Xerxes because you can't sell them, or you don't want to sell them because you're probably going to have to replace them and you're not going to be able to get enough deals done to do that. So you keep them as squad players. They're not good enough. They haven't got a future at United. So you've just got dead wood. Either way doesn't work. Like I've said before, because we've kicked the can down the road so many times, what we need this summer really is 9 signings. Well, that's never going to happen. But bare minimum 5. That won't happen either. But as I say, even if it does, 4 are probably going to go. Or you retain players who are deadwood. How are we going to get 5 players in? We already owe £500 million in transfer fees. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous situation. Language of football. You said a while ago, well, Casemiro will be off the books this season, this summer. And he's on 15 million quid a year. Just saying that out loud is obscene. So he's going to be 15 million a year off the books. Fine. Well, we're not going to replace him with a kid on 50 grand a week. We're going to replace him with someone on 150 / 200 grand a week. So you're looking at between, I'd say, 7 and 10 million pound a year on his replacement. So you're saving between 5 and 8 million quid a year on Casemiro's wages. 5 to 8 million quid a year when you're 1.3 billion pound in debt and owe 500 million pound in transfer fees is nothing. In the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. It might help with FFP, but I mean, really, I think we're missing the point. The fact is, whether it helps with FFP or not, we're assuming United's intentions is to create a great football team. It's not. It clearly isn't. Football first mentality or whatever he said, Omar Barada. Unbelievable. You mentioned Bruno Fernandes, language of football. You mentioned Bruno Fernandes might go in the summer. That would free up quite a bit of wages. Again, he's going to be replaced by players. United, if they do 4 or 5 signings this summer, as I say, you're going to be looking at paying. You need to get players in who are good players. Good players cost between 150 and 200 grand a week in wages of the calibre that we need to increase the quality of the squad to the level that we need to get it to. So, again, with him, you might be saving 5 million quid a year, 5, 6, 7 million quid a year. So even between the 2 of them, you're saving, let's say, best case scenario, 16 million quid a year, or 16 million pound next year in wages. 16 million quid. I suppose what that does, it pays off the compensation for Amrim, because these financial results are not inclusive of that. So a month after those results came out, we paid God knows how much money to Amrim and his staff to pay them off. The problem with Fernandes, though, and there's a slight digression, but the problem if you do let Fernandes go this summer, which I don't think we will, particularly not if we get into the Champions League, is that he's irreplaceable at the moment. I mentioned it in my last video. Cunha probably long term is the one that replaces Fernandes in terms of position, but he's not just a number 10. He's the captain. He's the talismanic figure. He's the only proper player we've signed since Ferguson, where you can say over a period of time sustainably he's done everything it says on the tin, where his age profile was right. what he's done over a long period, scoring goals, assisting goals, leading the team. He's the one that's in the referee's ear. He's the one that's constantly in communication with his teammates. He's a huge pivotal figure, focal point, should I say, at that football club. Whether you like him or don't, he is. And there's not enough other ones around. Maybe in time that can be Cunha. Maybe in time, maybe more so in setting the tone with goals and assists. And Bumo can chip in with that. Ahmad can chip in with that. Martinez is something of a leader. De Ligt is something of a leader. But right now, you lose Fernandez, you lose far more than just one player. It's the influence he has. If we'd have let go of Brian Robson in 1991, for example, United had been right in the shit. Letting go of him in 1994 was different because you had Roy Keane, who'd already been there for a year by that point. You had Paul Ince, who was an absolute animal by that point in the middle of the park. You had Mark Hughes, Cantona, Bruce. You had these figures, Schmeichel. You had these figures that were huge leaders that could take that metal on. And the loss of Robson, it wasn't really felt, to be honest. But we're not that. If he'd have left in 1991, we'd have been up shit creek without a paddle. So he ended up playing for United well into his mid-30s, even his late 30s. And Fernandez, for me, if he goes in 2 or 3 years' time, some of those players I just mentioned in the current squad maybe might have caught up by that point in terms of their stats, in terms of what they can bring to the table. Maybe. But right now, that's not the case. So it's digressing slightly, but if you let go of him, you save on wages, but you've got a huge job replacing him. Just finally on the squad, like I said, best case scenario, we get 5 in, and I don't think that'll happen. That's the very, very, very least we need. If 4 go, you're looking at needing a team of players that never get injured. And let's look at that. Sure, been injury prone for 10 years. He stayed fit this season, but I'm not holding my breath for next season. And for me, has regressed as the season's gone on, and I think really needs replacing. Martinez, history of injuries. De Ligt came from Bayern Munich, where he'd missed quite a lot of games because of knee trouble. He's missed a significant chunk of this season, so certainly not a blemish-free record injury-wise. Maguire's picking up more injuries. Mainu picks up injuries. Cunha's had a couple of injuries this season. Ahmad had one major one last year. There's 7 players out of the starting 11, or certainly the in and around the starting 11, who don't have great injury records. So honestly, I think next year, if something significant doesn't happen in the summer, it's going to be a complete shit show. We can look at the stuff off the pitch and how, as I said, austerity and cost cutting and asset stripping has led to a piddly increase in profit when you look at the bigger scheme of things. But you've got to look at the human cost of that, and you've got to look at the fans paying for all that profit. Essentially, we're paying to keep the Glazers here, which is absurd. You've got that side of it, but let's just keep, if you think about on the pitch, as I say, with that level of debt, and obviously the financial issues at the club, how do you do what needs to be done in the summer? Champions League qualification doesn't give you gazillions of pounds. It doesn't. I'm going to move on to the stadium, and I was going to talk about this in the original video I was going to do. For me, everything hinges on the stadium, and unless there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, I don't know how this financial situation gets significantly better with the owners as they are, with the mentality as they are, with their lack of motivation to speculate, to accumulate on or off the pitch. I don't know how this gets better, so I can only assume that they're counting on the stadium as the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that I've mentioned before. Sorry, the phone just keeps going off. This is really annoying me. Let me just mute that so it doesn't keep coming through. Andy Burnham, but we'll just touch base a little bit with the Jim Ratcliffe thing because this is relevant. Andy Burnham's been heavily involved in supporting United with the regeneration project and also the stadium, and I think condemned might be too strong a word, but yeah, essentially he certainly criticised Sir Jim Ratcliffe for his comments on immigration, but he also went further than that and indirectly had a go at the Glazers by saying there's a group of people siphoning money out of one of our best institutions, and he was clearly talking about the Glazers. So it's an interesting comment to make when you are in cahoots with the Glazers and Jim Ratcliffe regarding the regeneration project and the stadium. Does that mean that then they withdraw their support, the government withdraw their support? Highly unlikely. Never trust a Scouser like Andy Burnham, but also, he greases his palms sufficiently, I'm sure all this goes away. But it's still interesting that he was so strong in his comments and he brought the Glazers into it as well. But I've done a bit of number crunching, and it's based on average ticket prices now and what I project the average ticket price will be moving forward. And I've been generous from the Glazers' perspective. I've been optimistic from their perspective, so it might be slightly wrong. Number crunching isn't really my thing, but if my numbers are correct, just in matchday revenue, United will clear £136 million a year more than what they have now on matchday revenue. So £136 million a year more than what they earn now in matchday revenue in the new stadium. That's a lot of money, but to give context, 136 million, that would be over 10 years, just from extra matchday revenue, you would be looking at £10.3 billion. Over 20 years, you're looking at roughly nearly £2.7 billion just from matchday revenue. A lot of money, but 20 years to get £2.7 billion from extra matchday revenue. Sir Jim Ratcliffe is 73. Avram Glazer is 65. Joel Glazer is 58. They're the three main protagonists in all this. Are they at an age where they are prepared to wait for 20 years to see the fruit of their labour? £2.7 billion after 20 years? I'm not sure. And by the way, it's not just between them three. There's 5 Glazer siblings and Ineos, and there's other stakeholders as well, but they're the main 6 if you say there's 5 Glazer siblings and Ineos. So the big money is going to be split mainly 6 ways. £2.7 billion split 6 ways, or, if you believe what you read, the potential maybe to sell the club in the next couple of years for £5 to £6 billion, so roughly £1 billion each. Generation upon generational wealth that you could get now, stress-free, walk away, no drama, never need to have anything to do with Man United again, all the debts cleared, heist of the century. Some might say, sunshine follows thunder, some might say, yeah, but there's not just the matchday revenue, you've got sponsorships, you've got added revenue from all kinds of different things. Yeah, you have, but that brings me to how do you pay for this stadium? As we found out, the club's £1.3 billion in debt. Stadium naming rights, yeah. Not to the tune of £3 billion, which is going to, I should have said, Simon Jordan, like him or loathe him on TalkSport, he's a former football club owner. Bit facetious, bit superior at times. I think certainly knows his stuff regarding business though. And he said recently, if Tottenham Stadium cost £1.5 billion whenever they did it, United's would probably cost north of 3, given the cost of materials now, but also what United are proposing to do and the scale of it. So in terms of stadium naming rights, it's not going to be to the tune of £3 billion. In terms of extra revenue, it's not going to add up to £3 billion. In terms of, your match day revenue, it's £2.7 billion after 20 years. It's not as if you can say, well, they'll get it back in match day revenue in a couple of years. It's not. It's 20 years. It's going to be to match the cost of the stadium. So how do you fund it when you're £1.3 billion in debt? So reading between the lines, match day revenue, stadium naming rights, that just pays off the stadium. That doesn't make the club, make the owners richer. There's got to be something else at play here. Are they just preparing to put more debt on it? Can you keep doing that? I don't know. I wouldn't have thought so. Not to the degree that we're already in debt and then you pile more down it. Not when you're already cutting corners in the transfer windows and already cutting corners as many as you can around the club, because you can't afford to keep up as it stands right now without an extra £3 billion financial burden on the club. I don't think you can put much more debt on it. So how do you pay for it? Interesting question. As I said pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You get a lot of money from extra match day revenue, but there must be something else going on, because it's not the degree of money that it would take for it to make it worth their while, I don't think, when you look at it like that and you look at their ages, as I mentioned. My understanding is that there's like a full-time team working on the stadium round the clock, trying to make sure that you know this gets off the ground. But there's others that think this is a complete ruse. I've got a mate who's a season ticket holder at Old Trafford, very smart businessman, entrepreneur, knows a ton more than I know about this type of stuff. And whilst it's not gospel truth, when I was speaking to him about it, he just said, this isn't happening, this stadium thing. He said, it's just nonsense. It's a ruse. He said, on the scale of what's needed to happen here, he said, it'd take 2 years to get planning permission for it. They haven't even accrued all of the land they need to be able to do it. So his words were, it either won't happen or it'll happen in 15 to 20 years when the Glazers are long gone. I guess the other thing is perhaps the stadium happens, they reap the benefits for a few years and then they sell for big money, maybe. But I said last year, the story came out around this time last year about the new stadium, the pictures of the circus tent, and I said then, it said that it was going to be ready by between 2030 and 32, and I said, well, when the Glazers are involved, you've got to add on another, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years on top of that, because it always takes longer with them. Nothing ever happens quickly. Things might be going on behind closed doors, but nothing really has been added to that. Nothing's been said. Nothing's really sort of moved on or progressed from what I can gather anyway. So I don't really know what to think about the stadium. There's a few questions there that I think are worth pondering. Increased revenue, yeah, but to the degree where it's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow when you consider the cost of it all, maybe not. Maybe rather than it be the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and they stay, perhaps it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow because they go. But they don't act like a group of people that are going anywhere anytime soon. And the financial results, we need to be careful how it's framed. There's an improvement in the profit margin. It's not massively significant. I don't think it's going to carry on being that way, because, as I say, we've spent probably 16-20 million pound on paying Amorim off and his staff, and the costs that have been cut, you can't cut them again. A lot of that profit has come from, as he said it there, Emma Barada. Let me just read it out again. We're now seeing the positive financial impact of our off-pitch transformation. What, 28 million quid? Most of that 28 million quid has come from cutting costs and upping prices. Well, you've already done that. What do you do next to make it sustainable? We're going to qualify probably for the Champions League. But then like I said, what happens next year? How do you get back in the Champions League? This has ended up being as long as a video I was going to do anyway. on if there's a pathway to new ownership. There isn't a pathway to new ownership, and maybe I will make a video on that, but it doesn't feel like the time is right to do it now. I think this is more important. And I'll just sum it up. You've got owners who use United to take money from and to put debt against, and really more recently it's just been to put debt against from the Glazers. It's just an asset to put debt against. There's no interest in making it a top football team. That's a secondary thought. It's almost an afterthought. It's almost an inconvenience. Ineos have clearly been brought in deliberately to help make the stadium happen. They'll drop Ineos as quick as that if that doesn't materialise. But whilst you've got owners with those motivating factors, and our opponents or our opposition, our competition, have owners who are absolutely hell-bent on success, already are better than us, already more well-run than us, have far better financial situations, and are trying to find ways to get more money into their clubs, it just doesn't work. As always, Glazers out.